and the bad, or the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we will look through the 45 years, through the lenses of Professor Jonathan MOYO. So I know we still have questions, but let's be patient. We go through the conversation, then we are going to have a discussion. So, Prof, I started off our space with a song from Pax Afro, which was a star-studded group. You helped establish their double CD album called Back to Black at 26 songs. And you wrote most, or if not all, the songs. But you also wrote other songs like Go Warriors, Go, Come to Victoria Falls. I'm not sure whether you also wrote Rambai Magashinga, but one of the songs that I like in the Pax Afro is Working Under the Mine. Mining what is not mine. It reminds me of Live Moma Majaivana song, ukekeke uticha wami liche lamwele kanda, or liche lamchai kanda, something like that. But Prof, what inspired you to write this particular song, Working Under the Mine?
Well, I think the general inspiration came from the concept of the album as a 26 song offering, which was meant to demonstrate a number of things. First, that as you were indicating yourself, that it was a star-studded production. The idea was to showcase the talent, the amazing musical talent that our country has always had. And in particular, to do so in the context of the debate of the moment, which was about local content versus foreign content, in particular music. To say, in fact, we can have as competitive, interesting, local produced music produced in accordance with the production standards anywhere else in the world, and that it was commercial, and that if you do so, you have to bring, and to do so well, you have to bring a cross-section of talent. Performers, musicians, guitarists, singers, but also music writers. There was, and I think there still is, an idea in Zimbabwe that if you are a good singer, you must also write your songs. But it is not always the case that good vocal musicians who use the voice as their God-given talent can also write songs, or that those who play various instruments, be it a guitar, drums, or whatever, in order to do music, they must come up with their songs. If you look at what happens around the world, music is a product of different talents, and you have to have those talents together. I started songwriting myself as an undergraduate at the University of Southern California, and I had access to quite a number of internationally renowned songwriters. And I have been writing songs since 1979, and have had the opportunity to have some of my songs performed by some of the best musicians. So when you write songs, you have a different experience from that of those who play songs. And in the case of the album, it was to show that you must be in tune with the experiences, the history, the life of your community. And one experience that has defined us in our part of the world is the Wenela experience. Mining is an important part of our history. And yet, those who have been part of that experience who will tell you that they have told their labor has gone down the drain. And it is quite a captivating story to reflect and tell in music how many in our part of the world have worked under the mines in our country, in our region, and that perhaps the colonization of our country had to do with that experience of working under the mine, mining what is not yours. And yet, in fact, it should be yours because it is part of the land that God gave us as Zimbabweans or as Southern Africans. That's a long story made short, or maybe I've already made it very long.
Yeah, that is an interesting reflection because it's all about what we are going to be talking about today. Zimbabwe at 45, and the story starts in 1980 when we get our independence. So you return from your scholarship and you come to Zimbabwe. What struck you as the most? What struck you the most about the new nation when you returned?
Well, I should first point out that on Independence Day itself, I was not in Zimbabwe. I was still a student at the University of Southern California in the United States. I was just about to finish my undergraduate degree, and we celebrated independence in California. I was a very active ZANU PF member at the time. We had a very, I would think, one of the robust, interesting ZANU PF districts. We used to put together what we could, raise funds, put clothing and so forth, and send it to Maputo. Through the then ambassador, Chirivavi Kangai, who was the representative in New York. So we actually were an active group, and I was the political commissar of that group. Our chairperson was, I'm sure some even on this platform might know him, was Msekiwa Kumbula. And we had even the now Reverend Andrew Mcheshetere as a member of our committee. So we celebrated in California, and I finished my undergraduate degree in August 1981. That's when I went back home with lots of expectations. But I guess some of them colored by what had happened in the lead up to the independence. One major issue for some of us who were in the diaspora at that time was that we expected the Patriotic Front that had negotiated with the British government and the Rhodesians at Lancaster to come back home as one and to contest the elections as they had negotiated our independence. So on coming back in 1981, against that backdrop, it was quite striking that the oneness that one had expected, even though there was quite some excitement, obviously, but that excitement was taking place on the backdrop of an independence that had not come as some of us had expected it in terms of the leadership, political leadership of our country. And the fact that I come from a part of the world where ZAPU was active, even though I was a ZANU-PF youth myself, kind of the perceptions about what had happened and what was happening. When one was in Harare, I arrived obviously in Harare. I didn't know anyone as such, although fortunately for me, my friend, the one I mentioned, who was the chairman of our ZANU branch in California, had come before me. We had attended the same university, and he had left earlier. And so when I arrived, he received me and stayed with him for a few days before proceeding to Bulawayo. And the experience I had on arrival in Harare was radically different from the one I went through in Bulawayo. It was like two countries. But I didn't stay much in Bulawayo. I just visited family and went back to Harare, looked for a job. At that time, I thought I'd come home for good, as it were, to settle. I had finished my undergraduate degree and decided immediately I should go and settle in my country. I got two job offers. One was at the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation. I knew the head of the news section, Dr. Lucas Chidea. He had been the principal of All Africa Communications Training Center before independence in Nairobi. And when although, and I'm not going to go into the story at all, but although those who have found it their business to talk about my story, about Mnangagwa and so forth, and they give the impression, the fellow ran away from Mnangagwa and went to America. The reality is actually far from that. When I left Mnangagwa, I didn't actually run away and go to some other funny place like America. I went to Mnangagwa from Kamwala Secondary School, which was next to the Liberation Center in Kamala, which we used to frequent. It had all the liberation movements. And when we were taken from there to Tanzania, to Mnangagwa, things happened then, which we couldn't, some of us couldn't deal with. And I went back to the Liberation Center where I had come from, and they understood what had happened and reposted me back to Tanzania. And from Tanzania, I was working in the office, the Liberation Office there, which was headed by Mr. Arthur Nyarota, an uncle to Jeff Nyarota, who then made arrangements for me to the office would post young people. I was very, very young, to Nairobi, to the All Africa Communications Training Center, whose policy head, as it were, because it was run by the All African Churches Conference, was Bishop Tutu. And Dr. Lucas Chidea ran that center. Oliver Chimenya was one of the lecturers there. And I did a course as someone posted by the Liberation Movement in radio and television broadcasting. And Chidea remembered me from that experience and gave me a job at ZBC in 1981 to be a television producer. But the kind of politics that were at play at ZBC were foreign to me. Being there and talking to the comrades and the language that they were using made me feel like I was in another planet. So I decided not to take that job, and took the one that I'd been offered by the Ministry of Justice. I got a job as a trademark officer to review trademark applications and so forth and approve. And we were based at Electra House. And it was very interesting. And there, I met a lot of interesting people, and the Electra House was not too far from Playboy, where we used to go there to have lunch every day. It was very, very interesting. But for some reason, because of the underlying issues, which were palpable, there was something about the environment coming from school and getting into this environment of a new nation. Lots of people excited, but as I told you, each time I would go home, they were not excited. I even would encounter people joking. My relatives, some of my relatives, my uncles, and brothers, sisters, especially cousins, who would say, "Ah, you are from Harare. We're here. That's where independence is. We are still waiting for independence here." So there was something that, from an undergraduate student who had gotten his degree in America, introduced to all sorts of political systems, had been been to Mnangagwa, was where we were at the university. There were comrades, fellow students from across the world, but especially from our part of the world, South Africa, Mozambique, Angola, where discussions, debates about the new society would come up, and we would develop ideas and expectations. And because that was my active lived experience in the classroom, what I was now confronting outside the classroom in my new country, much as there was the excitement and drama, there was also some underlying insecurities. Not everyone was experiencing the new country in the same way, such that I really became uncomfortable. The conversations we would have in the Ministry of Justice, the conversations we would have, especially the lunches we used to have at Playboy. It was such a fantastic place. But the discussions left me feeling very insecure about my job, unable to really to project myself. I didn't have any obligations. It just come from university. There were no marriage proposals or anything of the nature that was inviting thoughts about settling down and so forth. So I was so affected that I thought, no, I'm not properly equipped to be in this environment. I was also, by the way, at that time, contributing opinion pieces to the media, especially the Business Herald. I was challenging Comrade Chizero, was the Minister of Finance and Economic Development, Planning and Economic Development. And one of the senior officers in that ministry was the late Comrade Chris Kuruneri, whom I had met in Nairobi in 1977. He was coming from Canada and was seconded to the Ministry of Finance in Nairobi. And he was introducing us to lots of interesting music. In fact, I discovered Roy C. who became one of my favorite musicians, from Comrade Coroneri, the parties he would have there. So now he was in the Ministry of Finance, senior there in 1981. And they were coming up with things that I thought were quite strange. So I would take them on, debate, write pieces to the Business Herald. And I also used to contribute to the Sunday Mail. Which, hello?
Yes, I'm here. I can hear you. Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought something had happened that had affected. Yeah. So I would contribute to the debate about the new Zimbabwe, writing in the Sunday Mail, contributing to a column that I had been given by Comrade William Msarura. He used to be fascinated by the pieces. But through that process, I felt very strongly that I needed to go back. For me, I came to Zimbabwe in 1981 with some expectations of someone coming from a university who had been exposed to the liberation struggle in very strong ways at the Liberation Center in Lusaka, and from the Liberation Center in Lusaka to Mnangagwa, from Mnangagwa back to the Liberation Center, from the Liberation Center in Lusaka back to Tanzania, but not Mnangagwa, but now in Dar es Salaam, spent lots of time there under the liberation movement. And then from there to Nairobi, train as a journalist, live and go to America, then come, but somehow things were not adding up. I thought, let me go back to school. So I applied to the African American Institute, who had funded my scholarship as an undergraduate together with UNEPSA, United Nations Education and Training Program. And I was given a scholarship to return to do my graduate studies. But I guess in terms of your question, I come back, I become restless, I'm unable to stay, I'm unable to project my life with an undergraduate qualification. I feel being a bureaucrat would be problematic. I had an opportunity to get into the media big time. I had been trained in radio and television production. The people running this were people who had trained me, but somehow felt very uncomfortable. And there was already some sense that there were some people who were saying, this is our stuff. And then there was this sense of, if you are Black, this is your path. If you are white, you can go into business, do all these things. But if you're Black, the government will do things for you. So I just thought I would be better if I advance my education and prepare myself more as an academic than as a bureaucrat or civil servant. Being a civil servant did not give me comfort, so I went back to educate to do my graduate studies. And as maybe to come up in this, of course, I kept in touch with what was happening at home, but this time I was very focused that I'm going to study and prepare to be an academic, mainly because I had seen and had really been amazed by the academics. I had seen them at work, those who taught me. I had been publishing things even as an undergraduate, and there was something interesting of the one institution that really was attracting me when I went home in 1981 was the University of Zimbabwe. There was something very exciting about what was going on there. And each time I saw Professor Kamba, very erudite, very, I said, oh my God, I think I should go and join that guy. You know, this is where I belong. And then I immediately realized, of course, to do that, I needed a PhD. I needed to train to go for graduate study. So that was my experience in 1981, Mr. Ndebele.
Yeah, your journalism experience or training in the late 70s and early 80s, I guess it then explains your coming back, being a minister in 2000. That gives us a good explanation of the things that happened later. But looking, the 1980s in Zimbabwe are full of contradictions depending where you are. Like you said, it was independence in Harare, it was something else in Bulawayo. And people always say, the early 80s were good years in Zimbabwe. But they were the Kukuraundi years in Matebeleland. And with the reflection and hindsight, what do you think could have been done right? What went wrong in 1980?
Well, let me take this opportunity to make this observation with your indulgence, Mr. Ndebele, since this is in the context of our commemoration of the 45th independence. I think we need to, and this speaks to the question you are asking me to the extent I understand it correctly. I think we need a national template that makes it possible for us to contextualize and understand issues, especially as now we look back to that period and ask the specific question you were asking. In my opinion, it is important for Zimbabweans to distinguish the birthday of our country from our own birthdays. There are some Zimbabweans who were born before April 18. There are some lucky ones who were born on April 18, the so-called Uhuru babies or independence babies. There are others who were born on various dates since that momentous day, April 18, 1980. And yet others to be born, the beautiful ones are not yet born, the ones who are, And so we have these different experiences ourselves, different birthdays, but we converge as Zimbabweans on 18 April 1980, since 1980. And that becomes our politics. Our own birthdays are irrelevant. They are different if you were born before, different if you were born on the day, different born between the day and today, and those yet to be born. But all of us, despite those differences, converge on the date of April 18 since 1980. To me, that is the basis of understanding politics, relating to each other, engaging each other, interacting with each other. That should make us understand upfront that politics is not about us as individuals. It's not an individual thing. And more specifically, politics is not personal. It is interpersonal. And because it is interpersonal, politics is not about this individual, that individual, and so forth. It is about groups. And in the context of those groups, it's not even about the primitive groups, which are personal. And these primitive groups, I mean primitive not in the sense of backward, but primitive in the sense of primordial, the starting groups, those groups from where we come. So a primitive group in this context will be family. Politics is not about that, because you can have those relationships there as an individual, and maybe even your own personal birthday makes sense in the context of a family. But there are other groups. There can be business groups, community groups, and as we go up the scale, they are ethnic groups, tribal groups. And we go up further, we end up with the one group, which gives us the reason to be having this conversation today. Group, and that group is the nation, Zimbabweans. And that nation is born for us on the 18th of April. So we have to try and avoid treating it from a personal group, because it's not your birthday, and everyone has a different birthday. It's not your family. It's not your tribe. Because if you look at it from those kind of aspects, you leave others out. It's this one group, but a group, and to emphasize that it is a group, which is the nation. And that nation is born, I think, what went wrong, although I must say, in such a context where the background was an independence struggle, a liberation struggle, rushing to ask what went wrong can give one a conceptual bias, because you then start going around looking for wrongs. Perhaps sometimes, and certainly from a political science point of view, one shouldn't approach issues armed with a perspective. Well, in this case, the perspective being that something went wrong. It is similar to hunting with salt in your pocket, because then you will find what you are looking for, and what you're looking for may not be the correct thing from the background of context and concept that I just shared with you, that you must start by distinguishing these personal things, because politics is not like that. Nevertheless, if one were not to ask the question like what went right, what went wrong, and ask it and say, so what happened? So what happened? And then you let the story tell you what happened. You let the Zimbabwe story tell itself. We need instruments of analysis that allow us to engage our country with our country from its own perspective. There's something called the self-interpretation of society. Remember, society exists before us, and things start happening in that society. And we now must try and understand what is happening. And in this case, of course, we are looking at history as it happened, but we could have been in 1980 and saying, okay, now let's watch, and we are now going to tell a movie. Let's see how this movie is playing out. If we take that perspective, Mr. Zenzele, and summarize it in a nutshell, I think the movie will say, so we're asking, so what happened? Say, well, it's very interesting. First, one thing that happened is that these guys who had worked so well together, and we saw them speaking so eloquently and so convincingly at Lancaster, and they were friends, and they were all speaking from a nationalist template. They were quintessential nationalists, proper, well-grounded nationalists. You can trace them up 1957. And they had these different organizations from the Southern African National Council to now the ZANU, ZAPU, ZANU, ZIPRA, and the differences, they fought and they started as one. And then they start becoming, divided. But thank God, come 1979, they unite again. And they call themselves Patriotic Front. Then they come home. And for some reason, which is not self-evident, they don't deal with Ian Smith and his lot, the internal settlement lot, as one in the same way they did at Lancaster. And then, however, even though they divide and they contest the elections separately, they form one government and they work together. It's the first government of national unity. And it is made and it's from and of the creme de la creme, the best of the nationalists. They are there in one cabinet and so forth. But for some reason, suddenly, hardly a year later, even though they had contested differently, but thank God they come together, then they start dividing again, leading to these others being expelled. What that says to me, Mr. Zenzele, is that this nation at its foundation did not come to grips with a question that was in front of them. And the question that was in front of them, in my opinion, was the national question, which required them to appreciate the differences. And the differences, the majority of them, of not their making or our making, mostly natural, brought by God, but united by the fact that we negotiated this independence. First, we fought it together as nationalists, notwithstanding our differences, but we negotiated it as one. It is our Zimbabwe. Let us be guided by our Zimbabwe. Instead of that, I think there were some elements that came in where some people thought maybe we fought more than others. Maybe we deserve a lion's share. And maybe they thought this from looking back, how was really, who had more liberated zones and what. And then that may have fallen into convenient narratives of ethnicity and so forth, but became problematic. And then even at that time, as they were coming to terms with the new nation and governing it, not only did they get influenced by certain post facto interpretations about the past, how did we get there? How did we get here? They looked ahead. Perhaps as they looked ahead, they looked around themselves. They looked around the country. These other countries, we were the new kid in the block, as the expression goes. And then they found these one-party state regimes. They were very strong in 1980 in our part of the world. The free ones, even the unfree ones in Mozambique, Angola, and South Africa were colonial one-party state regimes that did not allow anything. And then maybe people started thinking, oh, no, not only did we fight the most, or one more, not only did we have more liberated zones, not only did we get more votes in the elections, but we must, and not only should we use that to form the state, but we must look ahead, taking into account what's around us, what state we need to form. And then they said, let's have a one-party state, and let's make sure that the one-party state is socially socialist, one socialist, one state socialist party, and of course these other guys who were not part of the cockpit were like, oh my God, is it because of our tribe? Is it because we subscribe to a different socialism? Maybe these ones see Chinese models, we see Russian, we see Cuban, or whatever. So differences started. Instead of we see this happening, not because we wished it upon us, or as we look back, not because we think, oh, this is good, this is what. We are simply saying, as we celebrate and we reflect, we say, there was in front of these guys an opportunity to address the national question, to belong together, to accept that we have different birthdays, but our country has one birthday. And we must converge on that one birthday. Our different birthdays introduce all sorts of things. Gender, we are different. Age, we are different. Tribe, we are different. Party, we are different, but not as different as we have become today. We're only different in the sense that the two major parties for us were ZAPU and ZANU. And we had the advantage that both of them were truly nationalists. Both of them had fought for our independence. Both of them started as one and ended as one when they negotiated. And there was a chance to ask the national question and answer it differently. So I'm sorry, I might have taken too much of the time. My direct answer to your question, what went wrong? I think we had a false start by not tackling the national question substantively. And we ended up with an answer that left that question unanswered, and I dare suggest to you remains unanswered. We have had a number of constitutional moments where this question has been rearing its ugly. They say Estron and Bati Rinemanyanga Putirwi. But we tried to put it in 1980, but the ones keep now. Oh, and then we thought it's okay. Then we had Gugurawundi because we didn't resolve that thing, and it was disastrous. Then we tried in 1987 to deal with it, but again, a constitutional moment was squandered or wasted in 1980. Constitutional amendment came back, reared again its horns in 1987. We tried, but it would appear, if we are looking at this movie backwards, we did a bit of it, clearly significant, but not enough. That unit accord simply stopped the war, but it did not express itself legally or constitutionally to resolve what had not been resolved in terms of the national question. So that constitutional moment was squandered. Then we get another constitutional moment in 1990, where we have the first presidential election. We squander it, and that first presidential election, unlike the parliamentary elections, this was now in 1990, a third one. Like the first two, 1980, 1985, which produced violence and so on, does produce some violence, but the violence is linked more to 1990. The 1990 parliamentary elections begins to mature our democracy. The constituency as the drama of or the place and center of that drama. But the presidential election, the first one, 1990, is very problematic from many points of view. First, it was intended to seal the one-party state deal but it didn't, because Edgar Tekeren Zoom got 25% of the vote. He got his deposit back, but there was lots of violence, and the model was so contested, the presidential election, and it created a paradigm of presidential elections that have been contested, whose outcome and conduct, much more than the parliamentary elections and, of course, also the local government elections. So, you see, like we have had 12 elections. As we celebrate tomorrow, we do so against the backdrop of having had 12 elections since 1980. And of those 12 elections, 7 have been presidential elections. 2 were held. One of them was held to parliamentary elections in 1990. The 2002 were held separate. And so much that we even thought ourselves that we can't continue holding these separately. Let's bring them together, and not only bring them together with the parliamentary elections, but also with the local government elections. And we decided to harmonize them. And so we've had 4 harmonized ones since 2008, and then 2013, 2018, and 2023. All of the 7 have been characterized by disputed outcomes, disputed conduct that have created problems in between them. And so when we look back, we see this thing. And for me, it's the squandering of constitutional moments. Starting with the one in 1980, then the one in 1987, then the one in 1990 that I was just describing, then the next in 2000, when we had an opportunity to come up with an alternative to the Lancaster Constitution. And we produced a fantastic constitution which has withstood the test of time. If people sit with sober minds and go back and look at that constitution, they will see that they threw away the baby with the bathwater that they thought was dead in 2000, because the people were more worried about their birthdays and not the birthday of the country, and not understanding that they can't reconcile the birthday. We cannot converge around people's personal birthdays or people's personal politics, people who come to politics with personal things, you individuals, who don't understand that politics by definition is interpersonal, and anything interpersonal by definition is group, and the best and most important group for human beings is the state, the nation state. So we squander that constitution moment in 2000. Then we have another moment, 2007, we squander it. Then we have another one in 2013, we squander it. Then we have another one in 2017, we squander it. And yes, 2017, we can call it different things. Some can say military assisted transition, some can say outright military coup, but it was a constitution moment which was squandered. And I think, arguably, now we also have another constitution moment. Some people talk about it as 2030 and so forth. And if you go by the latest things we've seen just leading to our independence celebrations tomorrow, we're squandering it again. A good constitution moment for a country is resolved when its debate and expected product outcome has something for everyone. And notwithstanding our differences right from our birthday, and that our birthdays are different. But thank God, the birthday of our nation is the same. It is 18th April.
So, Prof, maybe before we get to the 2017, because we'll get to that in the current moment, you have already started. I like the idea that you've already started about talking about the constitutional moments. And I just wanted to take you to 2000 and say, you have mentioned the missed opportunities. And 2000 for me is interesting in the sense that not only do we have the constitution making process, this is the time when there's the new opposition being formed, the MDC, and it's new. It's not the first one, but probably it's the most vibrant one. It gets seats. We have the land reform. We have starting the sanctions and so forth. You are now in the Ministry of Information by then, and you are in government and reflecting. You have already talked about the squandered opportunities, and we still, 25 years later, we still have these issues. Do you think, looking at 2000, Zimbabweans could have found themselves at that particular time and brought out a good result than we have now?
Yes, unequivocally so. Zimbabweans should have found themselves, should have found each other, rather, and could have found each other, except for the people who colonized us, who saw that this opportunity for Zimbabweans to find each other and do some of the things that they should have done in 1980, 20 years earlier, and some things which should have happened in 1980. Shouldn't do that, because if they do, then they will reverse what were the entrenched gains of the colonial project, and then they started sponsoring opposition. I know there are some compatriots who don't like hearing suggestions that Vagashandiswa, or even that some of them became sellouts, or that they were formed from outside. The fact that the opposition to the 2000 constitution, draft constitution, was funded by the CFU, which was white, representing some 4,500 white farmers, which was supported by the British and American government and donors, which was blocking land reform, which wanted us to buy back our land that they'd stolen from our ancestors, forefathers, and mothers. The fact that it is documented that the opposition as National Constitutional Assembly was actually donor funded. The fact that the MDC was formed in 1999 by a fund from the Westminster Foundation, representing the British establishment of Labour and the Conservative parties, is unfortunate, but it is history. And it is that factual background which led to a rejection of a constitution which was, even as we sit here, when we sat in 2000, it was like, confused discourse. But we can sit now with sober minds and look at that constitution, and we can say that it was rejected because of this background that I've just given you. And that a lot of disinformation was used to cause its rejection, and it became the first time where this opposition to this constitution was based on two things. One, a running theme right from day one when the Constitutional Commission was formed was it should be used to get Mugabe out. But really, to think that, and at that time, 20 years after independence, there were many more of our compatriots who, even though we say everyone fought for our liberation, but the truth is there are few who sacrificed and made the ultimate sacrifice or took steps that put them in that situation, and many lost their lives. But many were still alive than is the situation today, and they were much younger. And they were very clear that a grievance of the liberation struggle that they were told when they were being trained was the reclamation, the return of our land. And they expected that return to take place in 1980, rightly so. And that had not happened. So in the constitution, that new constitution, and for it to be meaningful in terms of our identity and existentialism as a free African people, it was not about just being free to vote. It was about the return of our land. That was a running grievance. And some people through 1980 and it didn't happen. So we do it in 2000, we are able now to do it. We now know that both the British and the American governments have reneged on their offer to buy land to provide a fund. And we have those guys 20 years later reneging, and then you have their descendants who own this, own in quotation marks, this land, saying to us 20 years after independence, buy it back or forget it. And say,